welcome to this edition of World at War. I'm your host, Mohammed Saleh. In the year 2020, China had about 200 nuclear warheads in its arsenal. And in just the last 2 years, the Dragon is said to have doubled the number of nuclear warheads it can deploy in the event of a nuclear conflict. But China's nuclear ambitions do not end here. According to the recently released Pentagon report that's been titled China's Military Power, by the year 2027, China is expected to scale up its nuclear arsenal to 700 warheads. And by 2035, Beijing will have a minimum of 1,500 nuclear warheads that it can deploy. To be clear, even with 1,500 nuclear warheads, China will still have only about a third of the nuclear weapons that the United States and Russia currently have in their arsenal. According to estimates, the United States currently has about 5,550 nuclear warheads, while Russia is estimated to have about 6,225 nuclear warheads. Other nuclear powers such as the United Kingdom, France, India, Pakistan, Israel and North Korea have largely maintained a steady number of nuclear warheads for the purpose of deterrence. But in the case of China, there is a fundamental shift that's been witnessed in its nuclear doctrine. Beijing began developing its nuclear technology in the 1950s and tested its very first nuclear bomb at Lop Nur in the Xinjiang province on the 16th of October in 1964. Within 3 years of its first nuclear test, in 1967, Beijing also detonated a thermonuclear device. But in the 70s and the 80s, China struggled to develop the delivery systems, such as the ballistic missile systems launched from land, air and sea to form a nuclear triad. Back then, the Chinese economic muscle hadn't been developed yet that is needed for the production and maintenance of these expensive nuclear warheads. Besides this, the no first use nuclear doctrine meant that nuclear weapons had been precluded from being a part of China's offensive weapons. But ever since the 1990s, when the Chinese economy began to boom, Beijing first developed its conventional weapons arsenal at a breakneck speed. And now that China feels confident that it can hold its own in a conventional war on land, sea and air, the Dragon is looking for nuclear parity with Uncle Sam, who for the last decade has been talking of a policy of containing China. China's nuclear policy that started off in the 1960s with a minimum nuclear deterrence doctrine has now been transformed into a second strike capability doctrine. This sudden spurt in Beijing's nuclear arsenal is driven by the fear that the United States, with its numerous nuclear options and also a more mature triad, could overwhelm China with a preemptive strike. So China is building more nuclear weapons. New silos are being constructed, such as this one in the eastern Xinjiang province and this one in the Gansu province. One can only guess at the total number of nuclear missile bases in China, but this map will give you a glimpse of how Beijing has spread out its nuclear warheads to be deployed either through ballistic missiles or in the air bases from where China can launch its nuclear bombers. With this, what China is trying to do is to ensure that it has enough missiles to get past the American air defenses and strike mainland United States in the event of a nuclear war. Now, I want you all to pause for a moment, because no one can win in a nuclear war. A nuclear conflict leads to nothing more than mutually assured destruction. With this being the case, is China being simply paranoid for seeking nuclear parity with the United States? The fact is, the United States on the 30th of October this year announced that it is planning to deploy a minimum of 6 B-52 nuclear bombers at the Tyndall Air Base in Australia. The AUKUS is a military alliance between the United States of America, the United Kingdom and Australia to provide nuclear-powered submarines to Canberra. Irrespective of how the United States intends to paint these developments, the fact simply is that Beijing has slammed these maneuvers by Washington as clear nuclear provocation in the Asia-Pacific. The conflict that has loomed over the horizon in this decade may well define the fortunes of the 21st century. Now, Xi Jinping has made no bones about the fact that he intends to reunite Taiwan with mainland China, even by force if needed. The Taiwan Strait crisis that unfolded in the month of August after the visit of Nancy Pelosi to Taipei is just a glimpse of what is to come in this decade. And China's whirlwind nuclear expansion is aimed in preparation of this conflict. For the second time since this war began, there have been strikes on Russian air bases. 3 Russian air bases deep inside Russia were bombed using drones. For its part, though, the United States was very quick to distance itself. Secretary of State Antony Blinken pointed out that the United States has neither encouraged nor equipped Kiev to carry out strikes inside Russian territory. But the fact remains that the firepower that Ukraine has deployed with great effect against the Russian war machine has all been supplied by the West. So the question, of course, is who bombed the 3 Russian air bases? And is the United States telling the truth behind these attacks, which have the potential to escalate the crisis uncontrollably? Our next report gets you more details.
On the 5th of December, Russia woke up to one of the most daring attacks on 2 of its air bases, hundreds of miles deep into its territory. 3 Russian air servicemen were killed and 4 others injured at the Engels Air Base in Saratov and the Dyagilevo Air Base in Ryazan. For the Kremlin, the attacks are a major embarrassment. Satellite images that have since gone viral show the Tu-160 and the Tu-95 strategic bombers, capable of firing cruise missiles, had been stationed at these air bases. Moscow had deployed these warplanes to repeatedly strike at Ukraine's infrastructure targets. Ukraine did not directly claim responsibility for the attacks, but this incident sparked an immediate reaction from Russia. Over 70 cruise missiles were almost instantly fired back into Ukraine, targeting more of its energy infrastructure. The Engels Air Base in Saratov is at least 600 kilometers inside the Russian territory. And what this means is that Kiev has the weapons capability to strike Moscow at will. The United States, which has supplied a majority of the weapons to Ukraine so far in this conflict, was quick to wash its hands off the attack.
We have neither encouraged nor enabled the Ukrainians to strike inside of Russia, but the important thing is to understand what Ukrainians are living through every day with the ongoing Russian aggression against their country, and our determination to make sure that they have in their hands, along with many other partners around the world, the equipment that they need to defend themselves, to defend their territory, to defend their freedom.
A 3rd Russian airfield was set ablaze a day later in the city of Kursk, highlighting Ukraine's ability to pierce through Russian air defenses even when they were on high alert. The attacks this week mirrored the audacious strikes that were carried out on the Saki Air Base in the Crimean Peninsula in the month of August. A total of 11 Russian warplanes had been destroyed back then. Winter has made life hard for the common Ukrainian people. Power supply has been knocked out in large parts of the country, and few people have guaranteed access to even water and gas.
You know, I have a few devices, 2 power banks. I need to charge them because when I go back to Irpin, it is dark there. I can only rely on a torch and there is no place to charge devices there. If I charge my smartphone here for at least a bit, I can watch something at night.
Contrary to what was earlier expected, the falling snow has not slowed down the pace of war. Analysts have spoken about war fatigue, about Russia running out of weapons, about the battle lines freezing. But war fatigue, if any, has been witnessed only in the Western capitals. Vladimir Putin has warned about the possibility of the war dragging on for a long time. He has blamed the West for its aggression and the expanding frontiers of NATO as the reason for the conflict. But according to Ukraine's First Lady Olena Zelenska, for Ukraine, peace means victory, and for this, every Russian soldier would have to be evicted from every inch of Ukrainian soil.
Germany has an old but a very serious problem. In an unprecedented raid, the German police cracked down on a fringe neo-Nazi group and has arrested about 25 people. These neo-Nazis were reportedly planning to attack the German parliament, stage a coup, depose the incumbent government and also install one of their own members as the monarch of Germany. Now, all of this may sound bizarre and perhaps even comical, because the group that calls itself the Reichsbürger movement is also known as the Crackpot movement. But the fact is, the members of this group were really well armed and could have posed a violent threat. Our next report gets you more details.
3,000 police officers conducted early morning raids at 130 sites in 11 of Germany's 16 states on the 7th of December. 22 German citizens were arrested on suspicion of membership in a terror organization. This police raid, which included the elite anti-terror units, is the largest ever crackdown on neo-Nazis in Germany. 2 of the arrests were made from Austria and Italy. In addition to this, 27 other people were identified as suspected members or supporters of the terror network.
In the early hours of this morning, we arrested 25 people in Germany, Austria and Italy on the basis of arrest warrants issued by the Investigative Tribunal of the Federal Supreme Court. We accuse the arrested persons of membership or support of a domestic terrorist organization.
The target of these unprecedented raids is a group that identifies itself as Reichsbürger, or the citizens of the Reich. Members of Reichsbürger reject Germany's post-war constitution and wish to overthrow the modern German Republic. The Royalists, in fact, are devoted to the revival of a German empire under the erstwhile monarchy. Whereas some, believe it or not, are even of the opinion that Germany is still under military occupation.
The accused are united by a deep rejection of state institutions in Germany. The arrested persons adhere to conspiracy myths consisting of various narratives of the Reichsbürger ideology as well as the QAnon ideology.
Long considered a curious mix of oddballs and dissidents and taken rather lightly, Reichsbürger this time around were not fooling around. They were plotting an attack on the German parliament to stage a coup and install a former member of the German royal family, Heinrich XIII. While another suspect, Rüdiger, VP, would have assumed the role of the head of the military arm. Emulating the structure of the German government, the suspects had created a council that held regular meetings since November 2021. Heinrich, who uses the title Prince, hails from the royal house of Reuss. A Russian woman, Vitalia B., is suspected to have played the role of facilitator. Germany's domestic intelligence service estimates the Reichsbürger scene to consist of 20,000 people. Of these, more than 2,000 are deemed potentially violent. As part of the preparation for the coup, members of the terror network acquired weapons, organized shooting practice, and launched recruitment drives. The movement has witnessed a considerable influx in the past year. Increasingly radicalized, Reichsbürger are a growing security threat, propagating its ideology, conspiracy theories, and extreme right-wing narrative. Though the terror network has been dismantled for now, there is no denying the fact that the extreme right-wing ideology is witnessing a huge surge in popularity in Europe.
The Central American nation of El Salvador is stepping up its fight against criminal gangs. On the 3rd of December, President Nayib Bukele announced the deployment of 10,000 security forces to Soyapango, a stronghold of notorious gangs on the outskirts of the capital city of San Salvador. In the ensuing house-to-house searches, more than 140 gang members were arrested in a span of just 2 days. Our next report gets you more details.
The government of El Salvador laid siege to the municipality of Soyapango. The suburb of Soyapango has a dubious reputation of being unsafe due to gang activity. These gangs, mainly the Mara Salvatrucha and Barrio 18, run a highly lucrative extortion business and will control over many neighborhoods in the capital as well. The operation involved one of the largest mobilizations in President Nayib Bukele's 9-month-old crackdown on street gangs. 8,500 army troops and 1,500 police agents blocked roads going in and out of the township of Soyapango, checking people's documents. Special units moved into the town hunting for gang suspects.
This marks a before and after in the policies of previous governments. And of course, with the courage of our President Nayib Bukele and with the strength of Nayib Bukele's government, we come here to Soyapango to free millions of Salvadorans who live in this municipality, contrary to what the previous governments did, which was to hand over the municipalities to declare them to sanctuary municipalities.
Last month, President Bukele had announced an ambitious plan to use troops to surround cities while house-to-house searches were conducted for gang members. Previously considered impregnable by the law enforcement agencies, Soyapango is the first city to be sealed off in this manner. The operation is part of a state of emergency that was declared after criminal gangs killed 87 people over a weekend between 25th and 27th of March. The nationwide state of emergency allows for detention without court order. Opposed by human rights groups at the time, the emergency nonetheless was extended by the Salvadoran Congress till mid-December. The plan aims to reduce the homicide rate in El Salvador to less than 2 a day. More than 58,000 suspected gang members have been arrested since March. The gangs of El Salvador boast of 70,000 members in their ranks. They are in control of large swathes of territory where they extort and kill with impunity. The human rights groups, though, have questioned the heavy-handed tactics deployed by the government. They have criticized the mass roundups, saying that they often sweep up young men based on their appearance, age, or where they live. But going by the success of these emergency measures, it is unlikely that the Salvadoran government will let up anytime soon.
The Russia-Ukraine war and the deadly blast of the Russian air bases have dominated the global headlines this past week. But away from the spotlight, there are other theatres of conflict that are brewing and that threaten to erupt into bigger conflagrations.
Demonstrators who support Peru's ousted President Pedro Castillo clashed with the riot police in Lima. Castillo's swift fall from power came after the lawmakers voted overwhelmingly to remove the leader, following his failed attempt to rule by decree and dissolve the Congress to avoid a third impeachment vote against him. Castillo, a former teacher and unionist activist who had won a narrow vote in 2021 buoyed with the support of poor, rural, and indigenous voters, faces separate corruption allegations as well. Outside the Congress, protesters set barricades on fire and threw objects at police officers who responded by firing tear gas canisters into the crowds to disperse them. One person was killed and several were wounded shortly after a man with a knife entered into a police station and blew himself up. The suicide bomber is believed to be affiliated with the Islamic State-inspired group Jama' Ansharut Dawla and had previously been jailed on charges linked to terrorism. The police chief investigating the blast said that investigators had found dozens of documents at the crime scene in which the suicide bomber had criticized the newly ratified criminal code as a product of infidels. Honolulu police officers shot and killed a man who refused to come out of Waikiki hotel room and had fired several rounds, forcing the evacuation of about 19 tourists and international students. Management at the Ohio Waikiki Studio Suites called the police asking for help to evict the man from their property. When officers went to the 5th floor of the hotel and identified themselves as police, they heard a gunshot from inside. Throughout the night, the man fired at least 8 rounds, including one that hit a police vehicle that was parked on the street below, before eventually the police shot him dead. Clashes broke out between the police and members of the Bangladesh Nationalist Party on the 7th of December, just ahead of a political rally. Police officers tried to disperse the rioting party members who had gathered in front of the party's central office in Dhaka. According to the reports, a man died during the clashes and people were injured as the police used rubber bullets and tear gas to disperse the party members from the streets.
Thanks for watching World at War. And if you want to reach out to me with any suggestions or comments or feedback, please feel free to tweet to me on the Twitter handle that you see on your screens. I'm your host Mohammed Saleh, and I'll see you again next week.